Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to learn about how to make histograms inside R using a package called Plotly. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn here. So I'm inside R Studio, and so you can see off to my left, I have my panel and my console, and then off to my right, I have the output for the actual plots that we're going to be making. So we're going to focus on histograms in this particular video. So let me go ahead and show you the libraries we're going to be using. These are the three libraries we're going to be using. Of course, the star is Plotly, the one at the top in line 1. This library, ECDAT, this is where we're going to get our data from. We're going to be using some data called PSID. It's just some data on like education and number of kids and stuff. ECDAT stands for economic data. It's just some play data to work with. And then line 3, we're going to be using dplyr. This is for, wrangling the data, if you will. So those are the main things we're going to be doing there. So I just want to take a quick look at the PSID data so you know what it looks like in case you're not familiar with it. So you can see it right here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 columns or 8 variables. Dealing with things like age, education level, earnings, hours, number of children, and the marital status. So we're going to be really focusing on education, earnings, and marital status for our examples here. So going back, now we're going to make our first little histogram here. I'm going to walk you through the code. We're going to be, of course, piping it. So let me just show this to you. So in line 6 through 8, we have our actual code for our first histogram. So I don't know your background, obviously, but we're going to start by piping in PSID, and then we're going to put in this little guy right here, Plotly. This is telling it to make a chart or something, but you have to tell it what kind of chart. So you put another little pipe here, and then you say add histogram. So that's telling it to take the data earnings from the PSID data set, and we're going to, of course, make a histogram. That's all that's happening right here. So to run all this code, I just highlight it like so, press Control Enter. And let's see here, it should be coming in a second. There we go. Now, what's unique about Plotly is that it's interactive. You can change the plots, you can move things, not move things around, but you can zoom in, zoom out. So if you look up here at the top, I can download it as a PNG, as an image. I can zoom in, I can pan, I can select with the box, use lasso select, zoom in, zoom out, auto scale, reset the axes, show closest data on hover, compare data on hover, etc. So for example, I could just zoom in like this, and now I'm seeing just this one little small section. And of course I can always go back. Let's see here. I can pan if I really wanted to, so that means I can move it around if I really desire to, like that. I can reset it back to normal. I could do lasso select. There's all kind of weird stuff you can do here like that. And so I'm only selecting certain amounts of the data like so. There's all kind of fun things you can do. I could zoom in the old fashioned way like this, zoom out the old fashioned way, all kind of things like that. So you know how that works. So let's move now that we've done our first little plot. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to change the color. This is a more advanced idea, but just for some fun here. So let me show this to you. All right. So now the first main part, all this right here is exactly the same. But what's new here is that I put something inside the parentheses for the histogram. And this is where I'm able to set the color. So I set color, and I use the function called I right here to specify the color, put it in quotation marks. Then I put a comma, and then I can put the opacity, how transparent it is, if you will. And so once you have all that, just press Control Enter. Give it a second to think. And now you can see the only difference is that the color is different. That's it. So, we could run this again over and over again, change it to red, see if it'll behave itself. Run it again. Now it's going to be red with the opacity. Okay, so, we could change the opacity to 0.25. You can keep playing with this until you're satisfied, whatever. But you're starting to see some of the potential with this. And again, we have all the same interactive features at the top, right here at the top. So you can continue to play with that if you so desire. Now, what we're going to do next is a little bit more complicated. Sometimes you want to compare the shape of two different histograms, normally the densities. And so what we're going to do in this next example, which is a little bit more complicated, is we're going to look at different densities from the same continuous variable separating them by a categorical variable. So that sounds really complicated, but let me just show you from our code here. So I'm going to be starting in line 14. So here's our new friend down at the bottom. So the first thing we're doing is we're creating an object called married. Inside the PSID data set, there are different groups within the categorical variable called married. It's like never married, married, divorced, etc. And what we're doing right here is that we want to look at the earnings for people who are married. So what we're doing here is we're going to, of course, call our data set PSID, and we're selecting these two columns, these two variables from the data set. And we're going to filter on the married variable, and we only want people who are married. That's what we're doing right here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I'll show you a picture of it. So if we view this, for those of you who struggle with abstract talking like this, this is what we have. I only have earnings for people who are married. That's all I have. I filtered out the other types of marital status, because if you look at our original data set, we have married, divorced, separated, etc. Those have been removed. They've been filtered out. That's what I did here. So I'm going to repeat this process, and this time I want people who have never been married, and I'm going to call them single, basically. So I'm going to create an object called single, and this is all the same code, but there's one difference, and that is right here inside the filter function, where married is going to double equal means never married. So I'm only pulling data where people have never been married. Of course, we also call that single. That's why I named the object single. So I'm just going to go here to line 16, press Control Enter, and I've saved that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is make it more complicated for you. Just be patient. We're almost done. And that is, I'm going to make my density. So I'm going to copy 2 lines of code, and this is what's happening. I'm creating the density. This is for making the histogram. That's why I'm doing this. The density kind of smooths out the bars in the histogram. I don't have time to go into all the statistics. But to create the density, I have to use a function called density, and I'm only taking married people's earnings. That's what this means. And if there's any missing values, which there isn't, I will remove those. And then I repeat this process for single people. I take single people's earnings and I create the density. And I save married density under d.married and single density under d.single. That's what it's going to be like. So just in case you're wondering, I'll show you what this looks like real quick so that it's not abstract. D.married. Let's take a look at that real quick. All right, so that's not going to tell you a whole lot, but these are the values right here. I can actually show it in the console. That's what I should have did. D.married. Okay, so here's what it's showing you. I have some X values and I have some Y values. And all I basically have here is some summary statistics. You know, the minimum, the maximum, etc. And then here, I believe they've been scaled. That's what I think they did right there for the density. That's all that there is to that. And so now we can actually make our plot. This is kind of complicated, but we're going to go through this step by step. Okay, so let's take a look at all of this. We'll go through it piece by piece. So starting in line 21, you can see we have a lot of information here. So let me see if I can walk you through this nice and slowly. First, we're calling our function plotly. That's what we're calling. Then we're going to do something called add lines. And the X value is going to be the X value from d.married, that density. So this stuff right here in my console, this is to the left. The left column is all this information right here. And then the name is married, and the field, I guess whatever you want the inside to be, is going to be that Tozeroi. Then I'm going to repeat this same process using the add lines function again. But notice that I'm using the information from single. So I'm taking the X values, that's the column to the left for single. And then the column to the right, I'm going to take that as well for my Y values. That's what I'm doing here. And so, of course, now the name is going to be single because that's what it is. And we're still using this field called Tozerway. After that, the layout thing here is just adding some, we call them, titles for the X axis and the Y axis. So we use the layout function right here, and we put this stuff inside X axis. We got to use a list, and we put title equals earnings, and then Y axis, title equals density. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Give it a second to think. And so there you go. And so if you hover your your mouse over the actual densities, you can see that it gives you a little output. I hope you can see that on the mouse. You probably can't, sorry. But if you were to mouse over it, you would see that. When you click on it, it doesn't give you any information. But if you mouse over it, it'll give you some information about the actual density. And the same thing right here. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it shows you right there the married is going to be blue and single is going to be the orange. That's what's happening right there. And so this is how we would do that in this particular situation. So you can see some of the power and benefits of, Plotly and how it works. So for our next trick, we are going to be doing some faceting. That'll be our last trick for this one. And then we'll be done. So with faceting, what's happening is that you're making multiple plots for whatever purposes you may have. And so sometimes that helps you to understand your data better if there's like a lot of overlapping and you can't see the patterns because there's so much data there. So for faceting, we're just going to go ahead and put the code in here, and I'll walk you through it slowly. So here we go. Starting in line 29 all the way to line 34, you can see the code right here. So in line 29, I just call PSID, that's my data set, and then I'm grouping everything by married. So what's happening is that whenever I make the actual plot, it's going to be separated by the different groups or the different categories inside the variable called married. So again, never, it'll be like, people never married, divorced, separated, married, etc. Those are the different categories within the categorical variable of married. And so it's separating everything out by that. Now the do function is going to, inside this particular function, is going to do whatever I want it to do according to the groups that I've separated the data into. In other words, when you look at this, I'm telling it to make a plot. Using Plotly, the data is a dot because it's going to be this guy, PSID, and our X variable is going to be hours, and we're going to add a histogram based on married, and married is our categorical variable. That's what's happening here. So that's why this is here. It's kind of going to make not only is it going to make the histogram, but it's also going to give us like a legend, kind of, sort of. And so that's what's happening. So I'm looking at hours worked by marital status, whether they're divorced, whether they're separated, whether they're never married, etc. Then I'm not quite done yet. So I'm going to have my 5 or 6 different histograms created, but I have to now tell R how to display them. So that's where the subplot function comes in. I'm going to have 3 rows of plots, and they're all going to have the same y-axis and all going to have the same x-axis. That's why these 2 arguments are set to true. And then lastly, for the layout, this is just so I can supply a title to the actual graph. So I think it should be marital status in hours. I made a mistake there. So this is just going to make a graph, or excuse me, a title for the actual output. So here we go. Give it a second to think. And there we go. Now you can see that we have 7 different graphs, 7 different histograms, if you will, and they're all separated by the marital status. And you can see how this is working out here. And so if you highlight one part, you can see that they all change because you're zooming in on that one piece of data if you really want to. And then of course you can go back, and then that's how you would do this. And so you can see how this works out and the power and the benefit of how it functions and performs. So that's pretty much it. The one last thing I would like to talk about is that if you look over here to your right and you look at this little tab here called export, here you can click on this and it'll allow you to save your plots as a HTML file or other options. It could be save as an image or save as a web page. And so that would allow you to export your data for whatever purposes you have. So if you want to save it as an HTML file, you can of course place it on the web somewhere if you so desire, and then people can look at it and enjoy that. So that pretty much wraps up this particular presentation. So let me just try to summarize what we talked about and conclude this video. So in this video right here, we really focused on using Plotly within the context of a histogram. So of course, a histogram is used when you have continuous data and you want to try to get a look at the shape of the data. That was our primary purpose here. And so we started with the basic histogram. I'll just go back and show you all the pictures that we made. We started with the basic histogram. This guy right here. And it's not that complicated. You can see the code right here. And so after that, we made two different histograms manipulating the color. This is one of them right here. And this was the next one with the red color. After that, what we did is that we made a density plot where we had overlapping densities on the same plot, which allows you to compare the shape of two different distributions, based on whatever categorical variable is involved there that serves as the purpose of separating them. And so that's what we learned right here. Let's see here, do one more. We learned that right here. And so this is the shape. And like I already mentioned, you can, of course, pan the data. You can move it around like this. This allows you to, uncover whatever kind of questions you may have. You can zoom in, zoom out, whatever you want. It all's up to you how you want to do that. And that's the power of this. Reset axes, whatever you want to do. And so our last little trick here, I believe, was where we went about trying to make a plot that was faceted, however you want to say it. And so if you see here up in the upper right hand corner, we have the legend here, and each one of these plots represents one of the categories within the categorical variable of married. And so you can look at multiple distributions at once to try to get insights into patterns in your data. So I want to thank you for watching and listening to this video. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Take care.